I'm here with Trevor McCandless, founder and CEO of Fusion CPA. And today we want to talk about family businesses. It is a huge part of our practice. It is growing exponentially. And I think Trevor has some great things to share with regards to family practices, the dynamics involved there, and how it affects you, and some of the services that we offer. So, Trevor, family practices or family businesses more specifically. They got a lot of different and unique nuances. Why do we focus in this area?
Yeah, well, I think it's good to touch on, our perspective, where it has been and how we're kind of morphing from a Fusion CPA perspective, right? Back in my 20s, I was working full time at a CPA firm. I was getting my master's in tax at night, and I started my first venture, a golf club rental company on the side. And it came to be that we started making around 30,000 a month. And at the time, I had a live-in girlfriend at the time who's a failed real estate agent. And I said, "Hey, can you help me out with the business?" And that's when I first learned that my default management style was that of a micromanager. I would come home and I would say, "Hey, what did we get done today?" And being an accountant, I actually even put together a timesheet for her.
Your girlfriend.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And I'd say, "Let me see the timesheet. What got done today?" And long story short, that ruined the relationship. You
Go
know? And I vowed, and I was in my 20s, right? And I vowed to never work with a significant other, family member, et cetera, again, right? Fast forward to today, I have two young daughters, and I'm kind of rethinking that perspective, right? Would I want them to work in the business? Would they want to work in the business? How would we kind of navigate that? And then just from a mentorship perspective, like I want to hand down some of the learnings in entrepreneurialism and business ownership. And so I don't want to have walls up in that, right? So that's kind of how we've gotten there. And then, with that logic, then we look at our client base of our consulting clients. I want to say about 65% of them are spousal relationships, husband and wife. And then a large number as well, there might have taken over the company from a father or a mother. And then they have children, same thing, graduating from college, coming into the workforce. Maybe they can get a job, and maybe they can't. And so where's an opportunity in the interim to potentially work? Is that in your business? If so, how are we going to hold them accountable? Just like any other employee, we don't want to be taking favorites, even though they're family members, because that's going to bring down the culture of the organization. And then there's, tax and planning conversations in and of that as well, with succession planning, estate planning, and all kinds of things. So it's a loaded topic that I feel that really nobody is talking about, oddly enough.
Now, you talked a little bit about the consulting piece. What are some of the nuances you talk about on the consulting side when working with family businesses?
Let's see, there's a lot of different kind of nuances involved. With our work in traction, it all starts with the vision of the organization. And if it's a family business, it's the vision of the family, right? Sometimes if it's one founder, one CEO, that individual is coming up with the vision. But when we have a family involved, it's more of a family initiative, right? Like if the husband and spouse have no other source of income, we might say, okay, well, when we are building out our division or our vision, we may want to have one division, one of the sources of the income for the business, try to be as stable as possible, right? To pay all the bills. And maybe another division is a little bit that we're launching has a little bit more risk. It's going after, the BHAG, the big hairy audacious goal, a little bit more versus just the BHAG, right? Because our whole family is riding on this venture. So these are just a couple of nuances, but I tell you, as we dive in this deeper and we kind of think about what our clients are going through, it's the sky's the limit as far as nuances. And so we're creating a huge library of these nuances, so which we can kind of help our clients.
Trevor, you have a team of highly qualified traction experts. And for those that are not familiar with traction, would you describe it as a blueprint or a roadmap for a business to follow that helps systematize and standardize the business?
Yeah, I typically refer to it as a framework, right?
Framework, yeah.
A consistent framework for which we operate our company. So, as I said, it starts with a vision. Where do we want to go? And then how do we back into that? on annual goals, quarterly rocks, as we call them, or quarterly goals, goals that can't be tackled in a week, that it's going to take 90 days to tackle. And then we have monthly and weekly key performance indicators that help guide us to the success of achieving those rocks and those forecasts and the numbers that we're going after on a 1 year, 5 year basis.
Let's talk a little bit about, I didn't realize how many family businesses there actually are in the country. I knew it was a lot, but I had no idea what percentage or numbers. Talk a little bit about, how many businesses out there are family businesses?
Yeah, man, we've been diving into these stats and we're still diving into it. We know our client base, but then, the bigger, the United States as a whole and even the world kind of, they replicate what our client base is. Some quick stats that we found is like 75% of entrepreneurs, 81% of established business owners co-own and or co-manage their business with family members.
Wow, 81%.
And that's established businesses. So that actually, I was surprised that figure actually went up a little bit. So it's a very large amount. Now, we say co-own and or co-manage, their businesses with their family members. That could be, a son, a daughter, something involved in the business, which isn't surprising, right? And maybe those stats are a little bit skewed high just because it might be temporary.
I'm sure there's a framework, just like traction, of things to do that you need to do in order to make a family business successful. One of the things that comes to mind for me is you have to have really clear duties and responsibilities, right? When things start to get jumbled together, it's like, are you responsible for that? Am I responsible for that? In any organization, it gets complicated, but in a family business, that whole dynamic just gets amplified. Is there anything else that you can think of that is extremely important to put some framework or have a discussion about prior to entering into a family arrangement like that, bringing on a new member, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you mentioned that, because whenever we're not hitting goals, whenever we're not hitting KPIs within our business, whenever we're off track on, say, our forecast, we then say why. It's an issue that we needed to discuss and solve as a leadership team.
Yeah.
And in diving into that, sometimes it's processes, sometimes it's people, et cetera. And when it's people, we always ask in the traction world, it's GWC. Do we get it? Do we want it? Do we have the capacity to do it? So do I get it? Do I have the skill set to do the actual job, right? Do I want it? Do I wake up and I'm ready to get after it? Or do I wake up and like, not this again? You know what I mean? See capacity, right? Do I have the capacity? Do I have the time to do it, right? Like as entrepreneurs, a lot of times, especially when we're launching, heck, 10 years in, you're still wearing 10, 25, however many hats, not just one hat. So do you have the time to be able to execute on the roles and responsibilities for that position? It's fascinating, the conversations that you have in talking about this, right? A lot of times we might find a spouse at the very beginning becoming the bookkeeper. It's very common. And at an EO conference out recently, the spouse was there and saying, yeah, Trevor, I hate being a bookkeeper. I retired from my job. The company was taking off and I just got put into this position. And it's like, okay, well, getting back to GWC, we can do it in the short term, right? We can make sacrifices, and this is what we do as entrepreneurs and families. We make sacrifices for each other. But that want it, you're going to be suffering from burnout over time. And then even, more things than burnout, potentially regret, et cetera. And if we keep our conversations within working together, and this is whether it's a family or any employee, if we keep it in the world of what is healthy for the business in GWC, then we cut right through that ideally, and then we get into a lot of other conversations of timing, affordability, cash flow, within those sacrifices that we all make.
Now, in your experience when working with these family businesses, one dynamic comes up an awful lot where you have the founder, majority shareholder, president, CEO of the company being one family member, and then other family members in different roles, obviously lesser roles from a compensation standpoint. A lot of times that starts to cause issues. What have you seen, and what do you do to help create a harmonious environment there?
Yeah, that's where it gets meaty, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is where also the conversation can be differentiated into first generation businesses
Mm.
and multi-generation business, right? Because it could be a father, like we've got a client. We actually, oddly enough, work with other CPA firms in our consulting business, and the CEO took over the business from his father, right? He's 75 and he still wants to do tax returns. You know, I get it. Honestly, like when I'm 75, like you want to do something, you
Yeah.
know, you want to be valued. This is part of your identity, you know. And so just to kind of be done with that, you know, then it gets in the conversation of, you know, are there hobbies, et cetera, other things that we can do to help facilitate the transition. Um, but you have to be mindful of that, right? If we had an employee that, you know, isn't performing and, you know, they've reached a certain retirement age, well, I mean, within the handbook of your company, you might have a mandatory retirement age, you know,
Yeah.
so sometimes it's a little bit easier in that kind of scenario. But multi-generational, you know, just compensation period, this gets into profit sharing. What is a reasonable compensation? Are they holding up to their duties? It needs to be consistent across the board. And I think that's what a key piece of this is working with each other and our clients with a high degree of emotional intelligence, right? I think that the accounting profession, while I love our accountants and accounting friends, emotional intelligence isn't always at the forefront of how we're described, you
Yeah.
know, and that's something that we really strive towards, right? Is kind of being all ears to the big picture and then saying, okay, what are we charging at to as an organization as well.